Alright, so today we're gonna do the recap of the game number 4. As we have seen, Ding managed to strike back and even the match score. So this is the final position, but okay, let's go back to the start. And it starts with c4. A very unusual move. I kind of like Ding's approach because his seconds and his team, they've done match analysis, of course, before the match. They looked at their opponent. And one of the things they probably noticed that Nepo is a universal player, but he especially excels in the dynamic positions, which was also how Magnus was able to pinpoint Nepo's weaknesses, because he started to put positions in a very technical, dry, squeezing sort of type of the game he wanted to achieve versus Jan Nepomniachtchi. So c4 is one of those moves that allows Black, invites him to play e5, but we see knight f6, and now finally e5. So this is Sicilian reversed. I'm very curious because Nepo plays, with white he plays d4, and he prepared those very solid positions, but it's like in this particular situation, what Ding is doing, he forced Nepo to play Sicilian defense. It becomes at the same time very sharp, but it's also very positional strategic with some risks. Judging by the third game, we can see that Nepo was trying to avoid taking unnecessary risk, and he was trying to win with a small blood. But that's not how things really work in the World Chess Championship match, because you need to put your pressure like from the get-go. All right, so knight c6, main line, nothing bad. e3, unusual. The main lines are usually g3, d4, but g3 is the main line. Okay, e3 is kind of unusual. You have seen also people play e4 recently, e4 and then d3 and then g3. And the idea is to create a solid center, close the center, and then white goes for the ideas of an attack on the king side. But g3 by far is the most popular move. e3 basically says that we're gonna play the Sicilian reversed. Very interesting strategy. And now Black is forced to play either bishop b4 or d5. And we see bishop b4, queen c2. And now Nepo takes on c3 because he probably wants to avoid lines where you play knight d5, rook e8, and there is some famous line with even queen f5 here. Yeah, this is very old lines, very old theory. There's also some theory here with bishop d3, which I even analyzed for myself like ages ago. And the conclusion was Black was still doing fine. But it is very sharp, and without preparation, probably it's very hard to play this with Black, so he decides to take. So Nepo decides to take on c3 and steer the game into a more strategic, close position, hoping for his knights to create some central pressure. So bc3. White has to take with the pawn, because if he takes with the queen, there is a chance he runs into this famous queen e7. The threat is now d5, obtaining a very good Sicilian reverse, because white takes, knight takes on d5, knight b4 coming, and if white plays d4, there is always knight e4 idea. And then you take, and there is check on b4, or even knight c5. But there is also check, which forces all the trades to go into the endgame, which is probably equal. So Ding takes with the pawn here, and d6 is normal, but now e4. It looks kind of weird because white could have achieved this position by playing e4 immediately instead of going for e3, queen c2 and e4. It looks like he lost some tempi, but at the same time it's not so clear because he wants maybe to play d4 in one move. So this queen on c2 actually connects the rooks potentially. And if there is d4, bishop d3, there is this diagonal here. And also, again, you're potentially stopping f5. So Black has to do something here. I pretty much suspect this is a critical position for the evaluation of this line. Black has to find ways to create counterplay before white manages to complete his central grab, because then he will have bishops, pair of bishops, and then potentially go for f4 and a very strong attack. So castles, normal, looks normal, bishop e2, and knight h5. Yeah, Nepo is a very active player, so he's thinking, why don't I play knight h5, because now I'm gonna go f5, I have knight f4. But this is the position where the finesse sort of is required. Yeah, the computer gives a lot of lines here, like b6, h6. h6 is a pretty famous move. You sort of potentially prevent either knight g5 or bishop g5. Later the knight can go to h7, also with the idea of trading this knight to create more control of this square, and then prepare for f5. Sometimes black goes even, but main's idea for white, for black here is to play f5 and counter white's potential f4 push on the king side, countering in the center because you need to open the rook and create some squares for the knights. All right. So that's why he plays knight h5, but the problem is after d4 what to do, right? There are several moves for black. Nepo plays knight f4, but it's probably not the greatest move. But in order to see this, you have to really analyze line with queen f6. Because the idea behind queen f6 is you protect the square, the knight can go to f4 and also pressurize this pawn. So queen f6 is the main probably line here to understand that this is good. White really cannot allow knight f4 because then you have to give up the bishop pair, and now white has a choice. Yeah, it's probably going to be either g3. If d5, obviously you're not going to play knight e7 because of bishop g5 and you lose the knight. But then knight goes a5 and black gets the dream Nimzo position. White voluntarily created weakness on c4, voluntarily also eliminated tension in the center, and black is all juiced up to play f5. Black has advantage. So g3 is kind of a move that seems very logical to prevent knight f4, but then black has many ways to play this position. He can even play bishop g4 here, and if knight moves, then you just capture or trade the bishop, g6, black's fine. But the main line, of course, is taking here. You gotta take this pawn back, and now either bishop g4 or knight takes d4. Both moves look pretty good for black. So I would say bishop g4 in this particular situation, now that the pawn is weakened, looks very, very strong, because white plays d4, e4 a little bit premature before his king is being castled. All right. So black is doing fine here. So maybe not g3, but the question is, if not g3, then what, right? Because if you castle, then knight f4, and black trades one of the bishop pairs that white has. Absolutely great position for white. Yes, I don't understand why Nepo didn't consider queen f6 here. I mean, it's such a natural move. It's also a very standard move in this position. Very hard to understand. Very, very hard. Maybe he was worried about bishop g5. Then you play queen g6, and this bishop is, again, it's very vulnerable. There's no simple way to deal with this bishop. Maybe queen d2, but now this pawn is hanging, right? The queen d2 with the idea of knight h4, which is standard idea, but again, queen has to protect this pawn. And bishop e3 now, then you can play knight f6 and hitting both pawns. With a very, very complicated game, but I think black is just fine here. So after queen f6, black has huge chances to actually fight for an advantage. Knight f4 was very, very hasty. I suspect that Nepo didn't really take bishop f4 into consideration very seriously, because he thought, with the double pawns for both sides, white has double pawns on the c file, black has double pawns here, but black has potentially queen f6, g5, h6, and then rook e8. He thought that this maybe is better for black, right? Maybe, but the problem is that black still has to do something about this bishop. This bishop has nowhere to go. If you go knight a5, bishop a6 and attack this pawn, it's kind of very slow, and white can easily protect it. Also, what white is going to do, also a problem. I'm just not sure why the computer thinks it's an advantage for white. But right now, it doesn't seem like it's obvious advantage for white, yeah? Because knight has no squares, you get this nice looking center, but what are you gonna do with the center, right? You cannot play e5, you can play d5, the only way to play is to play c5. At some point, and if you attack this pawn, it's easily protected. Bishop can go to d3, but then what? Right, so very interesting position. Castles, queen f6, pretty standard. Maybe rook e8 is a little bit more accurate, but queen f6 is fine. Rook e1. And if white can manage to play bishop d3 and e5, he will be probably better. Actually, the computer says white's advantage is now quite significant. I'm very curious, why is that so? Rook e8, logical, bishop d3. And the computer really doesn't like this move. He thinks that white should play rook d1 so that the queen can maneuver. And the computer says that center here is very important, but you have to be preparing it, like h3, king h2, etc. Bishop d3 is not really liked. The main idea behind bishop d3 is to play e5, take on h7. Yeah. If black plays h6, looks pretty logical to me. Then you can play h3, and again, bishop d7. What is this position? And according to the computer, this position is better for white because after c5, I'm not sure why black has to take this pawn. Maybe he can just play like this, and then we're gonna have this structure, which is very, very unusual. But maybe it is actually a little bit better for white because now the pawns are all central. You can go a4, queen b2. Black has double pawns here, potentially weak pawn on d6. But it's still not very simple to play because black has potentially, again, rook c8, hitting this weakness on c3. Knight can go to a5, then doubling the rooks here. But if knight ever goes, then there is e5 chance. And again, even if you play e5, it's not so clear, yeah? Not so clear at all. So this is maybe a little bit better for white, but not so simple. Rook d1. I kind of like king h8 here. The idea is that you want to play e5, and then after take on e5 many times, you have bishop h7 check, and rook takes d7. It's called a pin. That's why the rook d8 is recommended. Then knight king here, knight a5, right? And that's what I was talking about. What is this position, right? Because pawns on c3, d4 are kind of looking like hang pawns. But you can play c4 thanks to this check, and potentially d5 is coming. So maybe this is advantage white, yeah? Check, king h8, then d5, and there's a problem with this bishop now. Yeah. All right, so very tricky position to play. Bishop, that's why Nepo plays bishop g4 immediately. I kind of like this move because you immediately challenge this knight. If e5, then you take on e5, bishop h7, it doesn't matter. Trading these pawns because knight is very, very active. So Dink saves his knight, playing knight d2. And now knight a5 is kind of premature, probably. Looks a little bit premature, I think. Because you don't know where you need this knight. So also a possibility that this knight maybe can go to g6. Yeah, if black plays bishop d7, then pushes his pawn majority, then plays knight e7, knight g6, I think that makes more sense. Because ideally you should play where you have the pawn majority. Alright, that means that's the side you really want to play. Also, you can just stand, rook d8, b6, bishop c8 maybe, and wait for white to make his call where he wants to play. Probably it's going to be c5, but then you may be willing to take with this pawn then. So rook d8, centralizing rooks makes very much sense. Knight a5 looks a little bit premature because not sure what this knight is doing here. Pretty sure Nepo wanted to play c5 and lock this pawn center here in this formation, just like a Nimzo. But Dink plays c5 first. You gotta take, right? e5, queen h6, perfectly normal, and d5. So we've reached this critical position probably of the game. White sacrificed the pawn. In exchange, he got this very nice looking pawn center. Black knight is on the rim. White wants to play c4. Queen c3. There's a double pawns, so these extra pawns really don't count. But at the same time, if black managed to play b6, rook d8, knight b7, challenge this pawn to a movement, and then knight goes to d6 to blockade. Black will set up complete blockade, and that will be equal position. So rook d8 looks logical, c4, and now bishop h5 with b6 is very logical. Again, queen h3, bishop h5, and bishop e4. This doesn't seem correct. Seems queen c3 avoiding and keeping this bishop alive seems more accurate because it gives white more chances. Black bishop on h5 is not that great. The reason why black played bishop h5, because if you play bishop c8, then this knight can now come back to a potentially great position here on f3, right? So that's why you play bishop h5. Also, you want to trade this bishop, active piece. Bishop e4, and rook e7 looks very reasonable. Rook e8, yeah, so far looks very reasonable. Play by both sides. I would say sometime probably knight b7 has to be played, which he did. Okay, rook e2, and now f6 and knight d6. All right, so this looks a very solid position for black. I don't exactly understand how black manages to lose this position from this particular position. All right, this is the first time I see this game, so I'm doing this recap. But also I haven't seen this game before, so I'm doing a recap while looking at this position from the first time. It's more of a fair situation, I think, because I'm sort of in the position of a player who has to figure out and analyze the structure and the game the way it is happening. The presence of this major pawn on e6 obviously gives white advantage despite being a pawn down, but black is now extremely solid. It doesn't have any weaknesses. There is no breakthrough for white, so white is better, but it looks like a draw. But knight f5, this looks a little bit iffy now, yeah. I wonder what is the problem if you can just take this bishop, because I think that's the most logical thing to do. Now you can take with a queen, you can take with a knight. If you take with a knight, I would really suggest just play g5. Everything is locked, and prepare for white's potential h4 or something. And then you open the rooks, and the black is looking again very, very solid. So bishop f3 makes a very natural move. I really don't like knight f5. Probably he wants to play knight d4, go into active Spielen sort of phase, but there's something wrong with it. Rook e4, queen h6, and queen f3. Okay, so... oh, he just blundered. Oh, he blundered. That's what happened. Yeah, so if you just stand, if you play g5 and play knight d6, black is just absolutely fine. I mean, knight d6, and then you take on h3. There is this exchange sack, but you don't have to even to take it. You can just play rook g7. White just got black's sort of useless absolutely pawn, but now there is a counterattack happening. The rook is still hanging, so I would say black is better. Okay, so g5 was this is a move number 28, and that's actually the problem with Nepo. He gets very, very careless sometimes. Yeah, he plays sometimes very fast, very careless, and knight d4 is a big problem, because if he plays g5 and just knight goes back to d6, this is just equal position. Black, in fact, is maybe better because he can actually use this extra pawn. But he plays the knight d4 and white takes, and knight b3, and it's just terrible for black, because white recaptures the pawn that he sacrificed, and then his knight proceeds to go to c6. Knight taken together with these very strong pawns is way stronger than this useless rook. And also black's a pawn is now vulnerable. This pawn remains doubled. Yeah, this was just a huge blunder by Nepo, positional blunder, in fact, in a very technical, dry, sort of a little bit passive position. Yeah, that's actually very, very, very strange. The top grandmaster shouldn't make a mistake like this. I mean, this is the kind of sacrifice that Grand Petrosian would be very, very proud of. He often sacrificed in exchange for a great positional compensation, but in this case, it's not just compensation, it's actually winning advantage, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Pawns are equal, black has extra exchange, but his position is completely lost, precisely because of this pawn chain and knight jumping to c6 or f5. So queen g6 and now g4, knight goes to f5 with a huge effect. If you play h5 here, then white can just take it and play queen here. Knight f5, and there is this neat queen h5, queen g6 maneuver, which is unstoppable. If you try to give up the exchange, again, white simply infiltrates. So you cannot play h5, but if you don't play h5, you have to take here. And now again, knight goes to f5, so try to save this exchange. But this knight is easily worth the rook. Rooks have 0 squares. White can go e7, d6 here, queen e4, king h8, and e7. This pawn is untouchable. This knight is untouchable. Black has 0, 0, 0, 0 counterplay, and he has to be extremely passive. And queen f7 runs into d6. The problem if you don't play queen f7, like, what are you gonna do? Yeah. Can you play rook f7 here? It's just queen e6, and then okay, if you just stand, queen can go to d7, king g8, and you protect the knight, and white finally gets to these pawns. If this pawn falls and d pawn rolls, it's just a win. And the g4, and then it's h4, and if h4, it's g4. This knight on f5 kills entire counterplay on the king side. He actually kills black rook on h7, kills black rook on e8, kills any counterplay. This knight also kills this queen activity. It's amazing knight, super amazing knight. It just, this whole knight kills black's entire army of 2 rooks and a queen. Very, very amazing knight. So queen f7, then you run into d6, the threat is d7, and if you take, knight takes, you threaten to capture the queen with the check. If queen e7, you lose the rook, queen g8, but then you grab, queen e6, rook f1, rook d1, and again, because the queen is the worst blockader, you can never capture this pawn. You lose the queen. Rook f6, queen h7, and queen g7. Nice touch. Again, preventing queen e7 by rook e1. Black is sort of in a zugzwang. If rook moves, queen f8, and black resigns because, you know, queen is being removed from power. Yeah, so very poor game by Nepo. I'm very surprised. Rook g8 runs into queen h6 check, and there is mate. I don't even know where king can go. If you go here, there's rook d5, king, queen h6. So this game was not really about Ding outplaying Nepo, but more about Nepo just completely self-destructing in a decent position. In this position, he plays knight d4, and he really miscalculates. I don't think he even considered this exchange sack, after which he's lost. But you know, that sense of danger that we spoke earlier about Grand Petrosian, right, and his famous exchange sacrifices, he had this amazing, he was one of the first players to emphasize the sense of danger in chess. That sense of danger of future possibilities that can create threats to your position, to your structure, to your king. That's how he came up with these exchange sacrifices, because to him, minor pieces and rook, the difference between the two, he made them blur and not so obvious. Because technically, rook is worth more than a minor piece, but in certain situations, where the rook is really inactive, like for example here, black rooks are really passive, but this knight is incredible because when he stands on d6, he closes everything and he hits this pawn, he creates, takes some central squares under control. So this knight was way more worth than white's rook. White's rook has absolutely zero play. The only play he has is attack this pawn. So just play g5, put the knight back. So it's a self-destruction and loss of sense of danger by black, right? And that's why black lost. So again, guys, if you like this recap, please put a like, subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next game recap.